You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Dude, you son of a bitch.
Frankie, it is good to see you, buddy. I am convinced that we're going to record a great episode today, and it's going to take me 16 hours to get it uploaded. I apologize to all of our fans that we continue to miss our Sunday deadlines. It's my fault in not being able to work with software because I'm a generalist as a podcast host and not technically proficient.
It could be that you're that, or for those of you who listen to this episode, or if you're like a talent director or somebody who's using AI to scrape our episodes and you own a podcast hosting company, Ian and I are ripe for change.
We are open.
The company we currently use is never going to catch this because they miss big things. Like this is going to slip right under the radar.
Yes, we are listening to offers right now. So go ahead and reach out unsolicited and hit us slide into our DMs and offer an opportunity.
We'll put something in the show notes just for you.
Yep. So speaking of generalists and specialists, today is July 2nd. Microsoft just announced another 9,000 layoffs. This is a total of 15,000 layoffs so far this year. On 4 different times they've cut. And it's becoming pretty clear that Microsoft is getting better and better at using its own AI to become more efficient. You're hearing the same things from Amazon. Jazzy came out and sent a blog post to all of his employees talking about how AI is going to change the world, and it's probably going to start here. We're going to be leaner. We're going to have less employees. And Microsoft came straight out and said the majority of these positions that it is cutting worldwide are middle management positions, which in a company like Microsoft, those are usually generalists. You don't take a middle management job in Microsoft if you're a fantastic engineer, because those people today are making $1 million plus. Some of the engineers, some of the best AI engineers in the world can command 10, 20, 30, $100 million packages. Have you heard of the term acqui-hire, Frank?
Yep.
So an acqui-hire is when a company makes an acquisition of an entire company to really just land the founder, right? Because the founder is a brilliant technician, engineer, coder, programmer. And you've seen companies like Meta, Google going out and gobbling up cybersecurity companies, technical companies, but it's
Lee, our buddy Lee got swept up in one of those. He built a company and he got acqui-hired. They basically just wanted to close down his company and get him, and they got him to a 2-year contract, and they got what they needed. He literally fulfilled 13 months. Like, we'll pay you for the rest. We're good.
Yep, we're good. You don't need to.
It was a big number.
Yeah. So you're seeing more of this, and I think it's going to accelerate. You're seeing it with the big tech companies right now, but middle managers whose only skill is really being a manager, right? I think that's becoming an endangered species. And I say that as someone who, when I joined NVR, I was sort of a generalist because I didn't know anything about home building and I didn't know anything about mortgage. Now, I had a strong sales background, so that was I guess I would say that was my technical specialty, and really it was a sales organization. But generalists in general are at risk right now.
So the way that I just had 2 summer interns. They are both gone. But I ask all summer interns at the end of their summer with us, do you want any advice? And the advice I always give them is, and they'll invariably say, yes, I own the company. So I say, number 1, buy hard assets. Number 2, don't get fat. And they all giggle. But what I always tell people is this: in your 20s and into your low 30s, you need to be acquiring skills. And the only way to acquire those skills is to physically do those jobs. In your 30s, you should be managing the skills that you acquired in your 20s. And in your 40s, you should be some level of an executive who has the technical skill and the skill that knows how to manage, because then you can empathize and manage others, right? So Ian and I were having this conversation before we started, and what we talked about was one of our favorite managers of all time. He literally, the guy's name is Ken. I was talking to somebody about Ken 25 years ago. And the guy goes, it's amazing to me. Ken hasn't been in construction in 30 years and he still knows when something's wrong. He knows what to call out. You're like, how do you know that? Because he learned the skill and he hasn't ruined his memory with booze or drugs or shit like that. He still has the skill. He's built off of it over time.
It wasn't from lack of trying on the booze, because he does enjoy his wine.
He does. He is a wine hound, but more later in life. My point in the matter is, if you do it right, you scale on it. So what Ian's going to talk about is being a specialist versus a generalist. And what I think is actually one of the more interesting things about what we're going to talk about today is proximity. So if you're really good at something, you get into tent. And once you get into tent, because you have proximity, your time on the ride might be short, but you might have a hell of a ride that has a long tail. So we'll kind of talk about those kind of couple of things.
So the best way for us to talk about this is a movie that Frank and I enjoy, The Social Network. Social Network is about the rise of Facebook and how Zuckerberg started it from his dorm room at Harvard. And it was a bit of a controversial movie because Zuckerberg didn't really comment on it for a while. And when he did, he said it was pure fiction. But I can also see why he would say that, because the movie sort of depicts him as a nerdy prick.
Yeah, real asshole.
He's the only asshole in the whole deal. And I'm sure there were multiple sides to all of these things. But he certainly didn't come across as a sympathetic figure throughout.
Fun fact, since I am the king of insignificant details. Fun fact, at the time he closed Facebook for the day and they took the entire company to see the movie when it came out, number one. Number two, he did comment that he did own every single sweatshirt that Jesse Eisenberg wore in the movie. They got the sweatshirts right, and he had those same flip-flops, FYI.
Did not know any of those things. Now, did he get a special viewing of this? Had he seen the movie before he took the people?
No. But so he read the book Accidental Billionaires, which he did not. Accidental Billionaires is the book that gave Sorkin Andrew Sorkin wrote, not Ross. Andrew Sorkin wrote the screenplay, and the screenplay moved from that book to that screenplay. So he read the book ahead of time, but he did not. My knowledge is he had no intel on the film.
Yeah, his big take was that they got the emotional arc correct, but got most of the details just plain wrong or made up. Whatever that means, I think there have been a lot that's come out in the 15 years since this movie that I think would corroborate that Zuckerberg is that kind of a weird, awkward, socially kind of do anything to make a buck type of a guy. Regardless, did you also know that Shia LaBeouf was almost Zuckerberg in the movie?
Shia LaBeouf.
Shay.
And then they also consider Michael Cera, but he's a little too goofy.
I only the LaBeouf guy, I only know him from the Transformer movies that I watched with my kids when they were younger.
So one other thing that I think is reasonable to talk about here is this. So Ian and I are consumers of podcasts as well as podcasters ourselves. One of the podcasts that I think both of us really enjoy is one of Bill Simmons' podcasts. Now, if you don't know who Bill Simmons is a bona fide, incredible podcaster. Ian would argue that he is the same as Simmons. I know that I have work to do and aspire to be someone like Simmons. However,
first, Frank is aspiring to be like me, the talent of this organization.
You see my title, by the way?
Yeah, middle manager Frank, just a boss.
He is boss.
Generalist. I'm the technician. I'm the valuable one in this one, the talent.
If anybody is looking for a part-time gig, I'm willing to give this one up. But what Bill Simmons said about
company and co-host.
What Bill Simmons said about this movie is he said it might be the most powerful movie or the most important movie since the year 2000 because so much of our lives are now tethered around social media. So what I think is a good place to start with this, Ian, is let's talk about kind of how the idea started and then what came from there.
How the idea of the movie started, or
No, how the idea of Facebook started.
Yeah, so one of the pivotal scenes in the movie shows Zuckerberg breaks up with his girlfriend. That's how the movie starts. She breaks up with him, really, and he's pissed off, and he goes and he starts drinking and blogging about her, and then he starts programming, starts coding, he starts coming up with an idea, which, again, this is kind of fabricated the way it all went, but it is true that before there was a Facebook, there was a website that Zuckerberg coded himself, that was kind of his minimum viable product. So it was called Face Mash. He went and stole a bunch of pictures from all of the popular sororities and clubs at Harvard and put them all onto one website. And then they created kind of an algorithm where you had to click on who was hotter, right? So there'd be one on the left, one on the right. And what this sort of proved to him is people are very voyeuristic, and they are much more interested in a website when they are faces that they know, people that they know. They care a lot more about, they were more interested because there were actual faces of students that they bumped into on a regular basis. And so this, he put it out, it was really raw, it was a really ugly website, and it pretty much broke the servers at Harvard, because it got so much web traffic that it went down, that it proved to Mark, there's something here. There's something here that we could go viral if we could share insights into people's lives, which I kind of find interesting because MySpace was already there at the time and Friendster was sort of already there. So he was kind of proving out that he could do it, but this had been done to some extent already. But I think on this piece, I think the piece that I just find interesting is when you're starting a company, you want to test something as fast as possible, right? So get something out there as quick as you can. And is there a market for this or is there not? Because the worst thing you can do when you're starting a business or going into a new market is spending years studying it to find that ultimately no one wants it. So put it out there, see if there's interest, see what the price point would be. If there's interest, invest more. Don't do a bunch of research without testing the market first.
So the interesting thing about Face Mash to me is he comes to his dorm room, he starts to build this, and while he's in there, and this part is actually corroborated by the book, his roommates and his best friend all come over to see him because he's blogging, right? So they're drinking beers. It's like a Thursday night. This actually happened. And while that all happens, Edward Savrin is his best friend. Dustin Moskovitz, Chris Hughes, and Andrew McCollum are his suite mates at Harvard. Every single one of them was very quickly roped in to help this idea. Someone came up with an algorithm. Someone came up with different pieces and parts right off of it. And what became very, very immediately after the Face Mash, which went into what was called the Facebook and eventually Facebook, is with all four of those guys were involved. So Savrin had the biggest role. The smallest role is Andrew McCollum. He's still worth over $20 million now because of very, very small initial kind of contributions to Facebook. Chris Hughes, worth $430 million, not chump change. Moskovitz, who's very helpful, but it went on to something else successful after, is worth over $12 billion, and Edward Savrin is worth $35 to $40 billion. So because of the fact that this one guy had this idea, but they were friends with him and they were in his inner circle, he was trusted. You hear this a lot in football or coaching. It's called a coaching tree. And what you don't often think about in business is you have a business tree also. You go to people you know, like, and trust. Hey, are they the best in some instances? Maybe not, but you understand how to work well with them together. And every successful business is collaborative. And these people were rewarded in incredible ways. Like $20 million is not an insignificant number. That's a big number for almost everybody. So because of that, because you had proximity and you saw an idea and you were able to contribute. And that's where a lot of great ideas come from. Like there might be one person who's the catalyst, but what can you provide in that beginning with those startups? I think that is a really fascinating part of the story.
Yeah. Also, when you just mentioned some of those, the folks that made the most money out of those four were the ones that were the most technical.
100%.
They were the ones that could build it, right? They weren't the generalist. You know, the guy that made $20 million was sort of a glorified ad man for the rest of them. He did all the dirty work that just about anyone could have done.
Yep.
The people that made the money were the ones that had to do the 10,000 lines of code, right? That had to really get deep into building the product.
But let's not lose sight of the fact that A, being at Harvard, and B, being a suite mate with this guy. Do you know what the average lifetime earning is of someone who graduated from Harvard? Average.
No.
8.5 million. So this guy is under 45 and is worth 3 times the average lifetime earnings. Earnings is net worth. So because of the fact that there was a little bit of contribution in the beginning, like he wasn't as good as the rest, but because he was in the same suite and because he had some level of technical knowledge in the beginning, it took him to, like, I don't know. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. So what this leads to in the movie is it leads to the Winklevoss twins, who are they're competitive rowers. They're a couple of 6'5", 220-pound screaming steel and sex appeal. In the movie, I didn't know this. Frank did. It's actually only one actor, and it's CGI. So they use some body doubles and slap a face onto another one. Talk about face mash, and they face mash the Winklevi in this movie, but
which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, they come up with an idea, and their idea was to have a social network just for Harvard called Harvard Connection. And this whole scene I find interesting. This gets back into the generalist versus technician. The Winklevoss twins have an idea, and they have money. Their dad's rich. Their dad's worth a couple $100 million, and so they can invest in it. And they have resources. They can raise capital. They have legal resources, but they can't go build it. They need a programmer. And that's why they come to Zuckerberg, because they saw what he did with Face Mash, and they saw how impressive that was, that he built that out of his dorm. And so, they come to Mark with the idea, and he says, yeah, I'll build it for you. Right. But really, he was listening to that and thinking, great idea. Why would I go build something for you just because you had an idea? If you don't have the ability to do it, you don't deserve credit for this. And so he ends up, you can call it borrowing, stealing, you can call it whatever you want. He tells them he's going to build it for him. He never does. He builds it for himself. And that's how Facebook started.
There is a push-pull in business between delegation and doing. And I've never really thought about it like this, but I think it's worth talking about here. I always know I need to have the technical chops to understand really deep, nuanced things inside of my business better than others, even if they are more technical than I am. But I understand how that technicality works inside of the broader framework. And that's the reason why I'm irreplaceable inside of my business and other people can come and go. And I never have someone who has too much leverage over me, because I understand how that swath of what they do fits inside of the whole thing. So if you don't ever want to get swindled out, now again, the Winklevoss brothers got 60 million out of this settlement. Not bad, considering that's 6-7 times the average lifetime earnings of someone that graduates. Now there are 2 of them, but still pretty good. And the reason I bring that whole thing up is inside of your own business, or what you can do inside of your own job, or how you can protect yourself against AI or anything else, is how do you create finished work, and how do you present that inside of a business, right? Like what I mean by that specifically is this: you must know the technical side. If you move to a certain level, you need to be able to manage, and then you need to be able to synthesize how the technical stuff works with the people. And that creates a position where you're never going to be replaced, because you also have the technical side. That is the thing that I think will be very challenging. Now, if mid-level to me in the management, like Microsoft hiring tons of people, are people who aren't good enough at either 2 of those jobs to go. But if you can manage something really, really specifically, or you manage a team really, really well. Those are the types of things that I think AI is going to have a very, very hard time replacing for a while. We'll be eating synthetic meat when this is no longer a thing. So it's going to be a while. Those are the things that I think is how you can use this arc to kind of insulate yourself and job proof yourself.
Speaking of synthetic meat, when's the last time you had Spam? You had Spam in a while?
No.
Good
Have you?
Spam sandwich. You cut a little piece off, grill that up.
My brother-in-law eats the shit out of it.
He likes some Spam.
He's from Hawaii. That's what they ate there.
I haven't had Spam in a long time. My grandpa liked it, and he would cut a chunk off and you'd cook it like bacon on a skillet. So kind of cooked.
Doesn't need butter,
as
baby.
A kid, I liked it. It tasted like ham. I didn't know, but it's kind of gross what goes into Spam. There's no doubt it's not.
Now, I have eaten hot dogs. I was at Savannah Bananas a couple weeks ago, and that was delicious.
Yeah, hot dogs are delicious.
I don't weigh myself for 3 or 4 days after a weekend like that.
So, ultimately, the whole movie, Social Network, is tied around the arc of who's suing who. So everyone, once Facebook blows up and Zuckerberg becomes a billionaire, he's getting sued. He's getting sued by one of his initial founders, Eduardo. He's getting sued by the Winklevoss twins. And everyone's claiming credit and trying to get a piece of the action. And the Zuckerberg's entire argument is none of you built Facebook. If you could have built Facebook, you would have built Facebook. I am the person who did it. And, ultimately everyone gets a little piece of the action, but the person who gets all of it really is Zuckerberg, who ends up with $250 billion today. And that's growing on a regular basis. But Frank and I were talking about this, and Frank runs a real estate business. And if Frank were to get hit by a train tomorrow, and I had to go in and run Kava companies, I could probably do it for a few months. Because right now there's good talent underneath Frank. There's good people, and I have an ability to work with good people. I can manage, and I could kind of get my arms around the financial side really fast, figure out how to wind it down. But to grow it, I don't think I could grow it. I think I could run it for a while and not screw it up because I have an ability to manage. I couldn't grow it because I don't have Frank's expertise in construction. Here's where that would hurt me. I would struggle to call people out on their bullshit. I wouldn't know how many hours it should take to build a house. I wouldn't know why a certain delay happened. I wouldn't know that it was the project manager's fault and not the trade that they're blaming, or the county with the permit. It would be easy to buffalo me, right? It'd be easy to bullshit me because I wouldn't have his depth of knowledge. Now, would I figure it out? I'd figure out a lot of it, but I wouldn't be able to grow it the way Frank grows it because I don't have the technical expertise. I would have to be a generalist in running Frank's business, and that has a ceiling. A generalist as an owner, as a founder, has a ceiling. You are too reliant on other people, technical experts, which means you can't manage them the same way as if you could call their bluff and say, screw it, I'll do it myself.
I think it depends on the scale of the business, right? I think there are certain people who are not technically as strong, but they usually are the visionary in charge of a really big company. Like, I don't know if Jeff Bezos knows how to code, but I think he knows really well how to push people in a way that allowed them to do it. I don't think Steve Jobs was the most amazing programmer, but he had a vision and he had other people that went along with him. But he was the one that generalist versus specialist, I think, is part of it. But I also think it comes down to this: is your special sauce special enough to carry it? And so that's what it is. Like what Zuckerberg was able to do is he's the most antisocial guy in the world, and he built a social network. It's kind of like Mad Men. John Hamm in that show was a liar. He took someone else's identity. His real name wasn't Don Draper. His real name was Dick Whitman. He was a figment of the imagination of someone. And what's fascinating is he was the voice of America. And if you watch the arc of that show, he invents the most iconic commercial in the history of commercials as an imposter. So you have to have something that other people don't have. You have to have an ability to see things that people are missing. And there's like both of these two examples are outsiders being able to do that incredibly well. So there has to be a special sauce that you have that others don't, which Ian's calling being a specialist, or you need to have something about you that pulls things along, or you need to know where you are in that process, where how do you synthesize both of those things?
So I find that when coming back to the beginning where we're talking about Microsoft getting rid of middle managers, right?
Yeah.
When I hear middle managers, I think, that they know enough to be dangerous about the people underneath them, but really they're better at administrative bullshit and keeping track of projects and timelines, things of that nature. But I 5-on-4 group, I train people to manage for a living. And I find that the most effective ones are the ones who were good at the job of the people they are managing, right? So you were a good salesperson. Now you're a sales manager. Okay, you got to learn how to manage. That works better than I was a construction manager and they've promoted me to manage salespeople. And you'd be surprised, a lot of companies do this, right? There's an opening, someone was really good in permitting, and now they say, okay, I'm going to put them over our customer service department, or I'm going to put them over our purchasing department, and they don't know the job of the people under them. The problem with that is you are beholden on the people under you. You don't have their knowledge. You can't question things the same way. You can't call them out on certain things, and you also are kind of held hostage. Because if they left, you couldn't jump into their seat and do it. And so I find those type of managers struggle to hold people to a certain level of performance because they're almost grateful for them every day that they're there doing the job because they couldn't do it if they wanted.
100% true. So I'm going to tell you what I think of middle management, how it kind of works at a small business. And I've had a bench. Like right now, it's me and one other person that kind of run the whole entire executive team. It's two of us. We used to have 7 of us, and that 7 people cost like almost $2 million. Like it was really expensive. So the trade-off is this. I am now closer to the everyday work that's being done, and I can make people more efficient. The downside is I have less time to think at a higher level, and more shit gets through. It just does. Like there's just more BS, there's more gossip, there's more nonsense. There's someone or so may take an idea and it goes further along than it probably should because I don't have someone who can stamp it down. But the results are this. I have to spend more of my time in the technical because I'm really good at the technical. Our results are through the roof in comparative. We're way more profitable. But the downside of having less oversight is you have less oversight. So you have to understand it. It's like, are you going to run fast and loose, or are you going to run slow and tight? And you need to understand both of those two spots as an owner. And then if you are inside of an organization, like, how do I make myself irreplaceable? One of the things that I love about AI is you can take a ton of ideas and just feed it a bunch of ideas, thoughts, musings, whatever. And what it can do is it can organize them for you. But unless you have technical strength, it doesn't know how to prioritize it. That's your job. And like when I look at managing people, like I'll get a list of like 38 things, and the 5 most important are the bottom 8. Like, why are they at the bottom? Like, they need to be at the very top of the list because it's not people who know how to drive. So those are the things that you have to understand if you want to kind of foolproof your employment, is understanding all of these little nuances and understand the synthesis between the technical side and the management piece.
The application and the retention, I think, are what you lose when you are heavily engaged with AI. And I'll give you this example. So when I lived in Chicago, this is going to show my age. This was in 2000, 2001. So in 2000, 2001, people still had an atlas in their car. You had a map. You got it from a gas station. So my territory
spiral bound, baby. Rand McNally.
My territory was, northern Illinois. So, it had the county, it had zip codes, and it had all the way down to towns. And, MapQuest was just getting popular, but I was using an atlas. I was using
Back
MapQuest.
then, you had to print MapQuest and bring it with you.
Printed it before you went, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times I just use an atlas because I would get a call and they'd say, hey, here's where our factory is. Okay, I'm going to just head right over there. And I'd have to go in and highlight the route. Like, okay, I'm going to take this. It literally very manual, but
I don't know exactly where you're going with this, but I think this is worth saying real quick. Nowadays, we take like the wrong exit ramp. We miss like 195 becomes 395 and you go to the wrong one. You're like, damn, it takes like 7 extra minutes to do an extra loop. Do you remember when you went to a new city, do you remember how much time you spent lost
going in circles? So this would, like in Chicago, I'm on Lower Wacker, I'm on Upper Wacker. Where the hell am I? Why? And you get off on, you get off onto Lakeview, and holy shit, now it, like, to turn back and come around, it's 20 minutes. It was like, and I'd have appointments downtown. I'd never been in that city before. But what happened after 5 years of living there, Frankie, I knew the roads. I knew the side roads. I knew the side roads of the side roads. I knew the names of places. If someone would ask me
and
how
you
to get
still
somewhere,
do today. If you go back there today, like that, I used to drive all around the state of Virginia. Like if no matter where I am in Virginia, because I'm like to eat, I know where there's a good place to eat. I know where there's a good gas station. I know every little corridor, nook and cranny of this state because I've worked the whole state.
and that's how you would give people directions, right? They would
Yeah.
say, hey, I got to go out and deliver this proposal to at U.S. Steel, and I'd be like, cool, take the Griffith exit off of the Beltway. Then when you get off on that, you're gonna want to go off on Klein. There's like a diner right over on the side. You'll see that. If you pass the diner, go to. That's how you gave directions to people. There wasn't just, now you just give them the address and they type it in their nav.
Being technically strong and driving, this is just an incredible story. So my dad used to drive the entire state of Florida. He was a traveling salesman for like 10 years. He knew every nuance, like how to get anywhere. And as you get older, you start to understand roads. When you're a kid, you first have your license, you don't know how to do this. So Nickel and I want to go to the Keys. We want to go to John Pennycamp. Have I ever told you this story?
Mm.
So we wake up really early in the morning. We like stop at like a place to get like a bagel. Like we left at like 5:30 in the morning to get all the way down to the Keys really early. But we asked my dad, we're like, Dad, can you give us directions? Because back then, this is the early 90s, like 93. Like we didn't have MapQuest yet. You could look at it, but you didn't really know it. So like if I needed to go somewhere in the state, I called my dad because he knew where it was. So we're like, how do you get there? It was basically 3 turns. And he said to us, he goes, guys, you can't miss it. Once you get past this particular thing, it's on your left. Just look left and you cannot miss it. I look up at Nickel, I go, I think we missed it. We drove past it and then to turn back around.
It was too late. He was too late and hitting you up on it.
I told my dad, he goes, like, how did you screw that up?
Yeah. But so when I lived in Chicago, I knew everything. Then I moved to DC. So I moved to DC in 2005. And I remember I went from a company car to buying my own vehicle. And I bought a Jeep Grand Cherokee and it had a Navigator in it. And now I was going to new model home communities because I was working for a home builder. And so every time I would go to a new community, I would just type it into the nav. And Frankie, I still live in Northern Virginia. This is 20 years later, and I don't know the names of roads. I still need to type it into my navigator almost every time I go anywhere. I never took the time to learn it. And so AI in that way, because it's a bit of AI, a navigation system. It automated everything to the point where I never remembered anything. I didn't remember anything. And I'm hearing a lot from home builders I work with. Salespeople are using ChatGPT. How do I write me an email? How would you sum it? And they're getting better and better at it, but they're not retaining any of it. They have to go back to their AI every time. They're becoming more and more dependent and wanting to put more things in writing. And they are not, with your dad in Florida, he could just riff and get his way somewhere and think about it. He could navigate himself. For me in Chicago, I could navigate myself. I couldn't in DC because I had too much help. But it's the same with having a technical expertise and being a generalist that has to rely on people helping you. You can't navigate yourself. You get stuck without the help of other people, which is why the Winklevoss twins didn't do Facebook, because they would have needed someone like Zuckerberg who had that technical expertise.
So I think this is really interesting, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the movie. But I think it's based on what you just said a second ago. I think this is really unique. We've been thinking about, do we do an episode on AI and like what are going to happen to jobs, and like fuck if we know, like we don't. So what I start to think is really interesting is this. My dad graduated from a technical high school. So a technical high school is a high school you went to high school like equivalent of
trade school
2 days a week, and then you worked in the trade for the other 3. And it was I think he went every morning, but he left at like 10:30. So
like be an electrician.
he was an electrician. He went out and he did that, and that's how he graduated. He graduated from high school with a degree, but it was a trades degree. And if you notice what's starting to happen, my brother just was telling me about I won't use the dollar figure, but it's a humongous number, like north of $50 million that they want a contract to build a technical school in Florida in a pocket that is predominantly incredibly poor. And I think it's fascinating because I think that's an incredibly good investment. And those kids, if they actually can get through that school, are going to be set up with incredible technical skill in a time where it's going to have incredible value. Because you can't hire AI to do electrical work. You can't hire them to do plumbing or HVAC. Today, maybe at some point we'll have a robot, but it's going to be a while. So if you have people who understand how to do these things, and what they're starting to talk about now is there's this inverted relationship between the expense of college and the lack of expense of skipping college and learning a real trade. And there is a groundswell of support around that because it gets to, we're going to teach people how to be specialists because specialists are rewarded. And tradespeople are specialists. Like most tradespeople will go, I can do everything, but I can't do HVAC because it's really it's very, very nuanced.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. We started by talking about 15,000 total job losses at Microsoft. A lot of them generalists, middle managers. To fuel AI right now, the only limiting factor of why AI isn't even moving faster is data centers. They need to build more and more and more compute power. When you go in and you type something into AI, it needs to run and compute. The brains need to work, right? It needs to move fast. And the more and more people that are doing that, the more data centers you need. Well, to run a data center, those things are electricity hogs, Frankie. We used to build the power systems out for them when the internet bubble was going crazy. And in the next 10 years, just look this up in Gemini AI, in the United States, 800,000 electricians will be needed right now, above and beyond the supply of electricians today. On top of that, 200,000 electrical engineers. And those jobs are going to be highly paid. The electrician jobs, there is such a shortage of electricians right now. You can sort of name your price if you're in the right area where there's a lot of these AI build outs happening. And so you've got generalists where the talent pool is shrinking, and you have specialists, electrical engineers, electricians. You can't outsource that. AI doesn't make that more efficient. You got to twist the wires. You got to cut the wires. You got to run the cable. You got to run the conduit. You got to run the wires. You need an electrical engineer that can read the plans and tell them what to do and be out on the job and supervising and managing it. Those kind of specialist jobs are going to pay incredibly well. And if you learn a trade in that, then you can build a business on it if you want to. But if you try to go to school to be a generalist, a marketer, management, accounting, those are all things that are going away. Those are not positions that are getting added over time. Lawyers, be less of those. You know how many less lawyers you need to just sit and study books when you can go ask the AI to run every case study ever on this, and is there a precedent? All of that stuff used to take weeks and weeks of billable hours. Like that
And
stuff.
years of experience. I remember when this case bit me in the ass. Now you can just run into a model.
Yes, 100%. So in general, I think we're going to continue to see this trend of generalist positions going away and specialists making more money. And so what are some other specialties? We talked about sales. I still think if you have a strength in sales, you are going to be fine, right? And if you are a manager, you should be honing your strengths in sales on a regular basis. So if you're a manager that doesn't really know that well, you got put in as a generalist, you're going to be a risk. But if you have an expertise in just the way that I'll kind of sum it up is you should know 80% of the people's job underneath you, or you are at risk. You are going to get replaced by something else. So if someone under you quit and you couldn't do that job, like Frank, there's not a job in Frank's company. Not that there's a job he would want to. There's not a job you couldn't do, right? Maybe other than the IT, but even that you outsource. But there's not a job that Frank couldn't go just figure out. He was just telling me the other day, you were talking to Carla and she balances your cash and you did it like quicker than she could. And she's been doing it for you for a few years because that was your lifeblood for so long.
She's significantly more technical than I am, but I'm general at it because I've done it for a long time in the specifics.
Still do it.
Yeah,
you need
I know how to do
you
it.
get in the mix.
Yeah.
You get in the mix and do it.
So the way that I'll close on this episode is this. Have you ever utilized the website Celebrity Net Worth?
No.
I love that website. You just Google it and it figures it out. But it's like, I want to know how much so much is worth, and you can figure it out, right? So generalists, specialists, and money. I get fascinated by these little nuances. When they went and built their new offices in California, not their first office, their premier, incredible Facebook office, the first one they had, they wanted it to be hip and edgy and those things, right? So they hired a specialist who was incredibly good at graffiti, but they didn't have any money. So they didn't pay him in money. They paid him in stock options. But this guy was really, really, really good, was highly recommended, and was the best in the space. And instead of taking what would have been $60,000 for the job, which they didn't have money to give him, they gave him worthless stock. And that worthless stock is now worth $200 million. So what I think is fascinating about that story is you have to understand what you're giving away. Should you just give away 60 grand? It saves you 200 million in the long term. Or do you make that trade? But the only way you get a chance to get it like an at-bat in that situation is you got to be damn good at what you do and reputable enough that you can paint an office, or you don't get a shot at it. So these are some of the things you have to kind of understand and how to synthesize out, which I think is really, really interesting.
I just went to celebritynetworth.com based on Frank's reco right there. He put me onto it right here on the Let Me Speak to a Manager podcast. And I looked up Frank Cava and it said nothing found. Frank is not a celebrity. I'm also not on there. But I did look up Barry Sanders, and this is kind of sad. He's only, net worth is only $8 million. That's kind of sad. It's like my favorite football player ever.
Maybe he went to Harvard. That's the average earnings for someone who graduates from Harvard.
My guy lives off the interest on $7 million in tax-exempt muni bonds. That makes sense. That's what it says. Barry Sanders put all of his net worth into muni bonds. That totally makes sense for him, doesn't it?
He can live on $320 grand a year. He doesn't have to ever buy a meal or a drink in Detroit.
That makes so much sense that he would have the most boring investment portfolio of all time.
And at the end, he just hands the ball to the referee.
That's fascinating. So get a technical expertise. Don't be a generalist. You're at risk if that's the case. My technical expertise is being a fantastic co-host to Frank Cava. Frank is a bit more of a generalist on this show.
There's no doubt. But I am still your IT department, which is a job that will never be replaced.
No doubt about it. Frankie, good hanging out with you.
Good. Always a pleasure.
If you like what you just heard, and judging by the viewership numbers, you did, hit that follow button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. And it lets Frankie and I know that, a few people are listening to this.